Joining me now, former senior advisor to George W. Bush, Karl Rove. Karl, it's been proven it's not a Muslim ban. The words Muslim ban don't appear in the order, and even Middle Eastern leaders tell us they don't think it's a Muslim ban. But which narrative is winning right now? What do you think?
Well, I think neither narrative is winning. Look, Schumer is being a hypocrite. President Obama picked these same countries for a similar action. And as you say, it doesn't include the largest Muslim countries in the world. It has 7 countries that have generally been a source of terror threats and unstable regimes in which there are failed states. So this is hypocritical. On the other hand, the president rolled it out badly, and it had some flaws in it, namely confusion about whether or not it applied to people with a green card, permanent legal residents of the United States. There was also confusion about whether or not it applied to people who had visas, who had served the United States government abroad for a number of years. So these kind of problems help create an opening. And look, the Ninth Circuit is a liberal venue, so they're not going to agree with the administration. A judge, when he makes a decision not to have his motives questioned, this is not, as Mr. Miller said, a battle between those who want open borders and those who don't. It's a disagreement as to whether or not this policy is constitutional and statutorily allowed. And we ought to leave it at that and let it play itself out. I do think it was smart of the administration over the weekend to indicate that it might be willing to take parts of the executive order, particularly those that had to do with, say, a suspension of new visas to people in these 7 countries, and to basically say we're going to take parts of this order and redo it so that it's more difficult to challenge and more likely to sustain to overcome any court challenge.
Yeah, maybe if they had run it by the federal agencies involved instead of rushing it through, if they had done that, maybe it wouldn't have, it could have been more bulletproof at the outset. But you bring up whether or not I think you mentioned the word questioning the order. I mean, Stephen Miller created another firestorm of controversy. The media is saying that the administration should stop basically blasting away at the judicial branch. They're saying that it's trying to undercut the independent checks and balances. I think Stephen Miller made some comments like the White House should not be questioned on this. What did you make of that controversy?
Yeah, look, I think due deference is due all the branches of government. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. What if the judges had said the president is acting, he is closing our borders and acting in a fundamentally un-American way? They're obligated to decide whether or not it's statutorily or constitutionally correct. But let's just say they went out there and started throwing names back and forth. We wouldn't like it in a judge. We shouldn't like it in a president. There ought to be due deference for the respective powers of the branches.
Yeah, judicial review has its place. But I hear what you're saying, absolutely. While the immigration order is being hashed out, there's new data coming in about the refugees from the 7 terror hotspots. And here's the latest federal data. It shows nearly 3/4 of the refugees coming into the U.S. over the last week, they came from these 7 countries. The number also coming in at about double what the levels were even before President Trump introduced his executive order. Karl, what do you make of that number?
Well, first of all, let's put it in perspective. I think there's a grand total like 1,400 refugees that have been allowed in since the order stayed. And 1,200 of them, or 72% of them, are from these areas. Most of those are Syrians. Some countries among the 7, like Yemen, have 0. My suspicion is that the people who are being allowed in, even though extreme vetting rules, new rules haven't been applied, my suspicion is if we looked at those people, the immigration and customs people and border patrol people are not going to be, they're going to be erring on the side of caution in every single one of those cases. So I think before we get wired up about it, let's remember this is roughly 1,000 people. Many of them are likely to be women and children. Many of them, all of them, I suspect, have been subject to greater scrutiny than normal. And refugees do have long, complicated scrutiny of their records. My sense is nobody in the Border Patrol is going to want to let people in who might represent a danger, even absent a more stringent standards.
Karl, Judge Anna Napolitano said that the president could do an entirely new executive order and would wipe out all of the district court and the circuit court of appeals fight because he could make it bulletproof. What do you think?
I agree. I think, look, this was not well put together, as you alluded to earlier. I mean, what we do know, piecing it together, is that the Secretary of Homeland Security was apprised of the order, raised objections to it, but the order went out without his objections being heard in the Oval Office with the Secretary. In normal circumstances, most administrations would say, look, if a cabinet official has an objection, the cabinet official is due the opportunity to make those arguments in front of the president and let the president make the decision, whichever way he goes. And in this instance, instead, like Mr. Miller said on Sunday, it was drafted by a group of congressional aides who did not incidentally have the permission of their bosses to do this and had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that they couldn't tell their bosses that they were doing this, and it was rushed through in order to drop it out at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon. That's normally when you bury bad news.
Yeah.
I've talked to several reporters. There was no copy available of the order until 2 hours later. No briefer was available until more than 2 hours after that. There were no briefing papers that explained what it did, no backgrounders, no nothing, and it simply went downhill from there.
Karl Rove, we always love having you on the show. Thank you for your time, sir.
You bet. Thanks for having me.